I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The scandals. There are 3 right now. Benghazi. Setting that aside because that requires a different line than is in front of us right now. There's much to say about Benghazi, but setting it aside. There's the AP, the warrantless wiretap, the listening in on reporters, broad reach of the Justice Department. Setting that aside, there's new news about that. We will continue to ask questions about how broad that reach has been and what other organizations are involved. We're going to focus on the IRS, the Cincinnati office of the IRS. The Cincinnati office includes the part of the IRS. It's a very small part. There are 90,000 people in the IRS. The Cincinnati office that deals with exemptions is less than 1,000 people. And the actual team that is handling these applications is much smaller than that. This is one of the few parts of the IRS where nobody deals with money. This isn't about getting money back or returning money or processing your accounts. This is strictly policy. You apply for exemptions, nonprofit exemptions, from the late 20th century until 2009. And these are rough numbers, but there were 26,000 applications. All but a handful were approved. All but about less than 100 were approved. But in 2009 and 2010, because of political decisions, because of a Supreme Court case, all of a sudden there were new rules put in place for so-called 501c4s. That's what we know. I'm giving you facts right now about what happened after 2009. A new unit had to make new decisions about whether your nonprofit application would be approved, your 501c4. I welcome Lara Brown of Villanova University and Salena Zito of the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. We're addressing now the IRS. There's much to say about the others, but I'm going to stay with this. Salena, very good evening to you. We do not have more than facts or statistics about the Cincinnati office. But what we do know is that people are still digging. People are still trying to figure out why language was used, Tea Party, Patriot Party, 9/12, Constitution, concerns about the government. You have an excellent column up that's at Real Clear Politics talking about how this might have happened without anybody actually being in charge. You refer to a very famous drama, T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral. How so, Salena? How does that connect with what we're watching in Washington, we think? Good evening to you.
Good evening. Well, the whole thing, the IRS, the scandal, reminded me of T.S. Eliot's drama "Murder in the Cathedral," where you had these knights who were tripping over each other to please England's Henry II. And so they hear him, venting frustration about the Archbishop Thomas Becket. And he says, please, you wish someone would do something about this bothersome Archbishop. Well, they decide to please the king by killing the Archbishop. Now, when he confronts this sort of scandalous murder, Henry is, forced to deny involvement, and he punishes his kings, but behind the curtain, he is very, very happy to get rid of that pesky Archbishop. And that kind of power is called referent power. It's sort of like celebrity power, where you don't have to do anything, but people feel like the person is channeling to them that, this is what would please me. This is what would, if you do this, this would make me happy. And that's what this Obama sort of cult of personality, the impact he has on the people around him, whether they're confidants or underlings or, whoever it is. We've seen it over and over again when he does speeches. It has the same impact on people that work for him.
Lara, very good evening to you. Selena's explanation does begin to tell the story of how this could happen without anybody at the switch. However, you have at U.S. News a blog up pointing to not just the IRS, but all of these questions at Treasury, at Justice, at State, at DOD, suggesting that the explanation so far looks to be similar in each event. We didn't know, we weren't in charge, the government government's a big operation. We can't know everything that people are doing. Is that the Obama administration's explanation, or is that just in the early days of this, the explanations look like they're turning their pockets out and saying, we don't have any more for you, we're out of luck?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is really two things. One, they're trying to say no matter what happens and no matter what comes out, the president wasn't involved. And the White House sort of political staff wasn't involved. Now, obviously, that will backfire, as it has already with the White House officials who did hear about the IRS scandal at earlier points in time and haven't actually informed the president, didn't move things up the chain either at Treasury or even in the White House. But the second piece of what they're really trying to do is make it look as though incompetence is the problem and not some level of nefarious activities or corruption, because they don't want to feed into this idea that these things are occurring for partisan reasons or political reasons, that the government is still a good, positive entity, even if mistakes were made and things fall apart.
I like that, Lara, and I like yours, Salena, because in both instances, and correct me if I'm going in the wrong direction, what you're presenting is a case in which there is nothing sinister here. There is no mastermind. There is no Mr. Big. There's, in fact, a lot of inadvertency and accident and misdirection and misunderstanding that have resulted in triple scandals at this time. Salena, I come back to you on that because I don't want to speak without you correcting me. Is it possible that all three scandals hitting like this are inadvertent? There is no one organizing this.
I mean, yes. I think quite frankly, I think we're filled with possibilities right now. I mean, and these investigations are going to take time, and the answers, I think, are going to be very slow in coming. But, every single one of these scandals have the potential of blowing up for the president, and they also have the potential to just be sort of mid-level or underling type people that pulled these off. I think we are months before we understand exactly what happened with all three scandals. I do believe that more is going to come out on both of these. On the AP, the press wiretap scandal, I think we're going to find out that this is a more common practice than we initially thought. And I think with the IRS, I think that there's the potential that this was all through maybe not just the IRS, but other government entities as well.
Lara, because I've been reviewing Watergate, and I rush to say, as Bob Schieffer said, I'm not saying this is Watergate. Okay, fine. It's just, I enjoy watching my youth, and I've been watching it on YouTube. That's one of the powers of YouTube. I didn't know what it looked like in color, for example. I was a young and modest person wandering around in New York, and I didn't even have a television. I had to watch on PBS at night if somebody invited me over to their house. All right, so I've been watching Watergate, and I watched Sam Ervin's opening statement. This is May 17th, 1973, just happens to be 40 years right now. And in that statement, and he read it from a written document, Sam Dash was sitting next to him, the counsel, and he read it in his drawling North Carolina style very quickly, and some words he struggled to pronounce, and it was always charming the way he did that. In that was this argument: we need to have this hearing, Watergate, what became the Watergate investigation because of the questions about the break-in at the Watergate. We need to have this hearing to establish that the American people can have faith in the election process. That's what he said on that opening day. Now, it turned into much more than that because of the eventual problems. But quickly, is that what's at risk here? American people having faith in their governments, in the election process?
Well, I think there are a number of things at stake, actually, in this. And the problem is the American people, since the time of Watergate, have phenomenally lost faith in their government. If you look at levels of trust in government, they are actually below where they were at the time of the Watergate hearings. So, in fact, Americans have sort of less confidence, less faith, less trust. They tend to be quick towards cynicism, which I would also argue is part of the indifference that we're seeing in terms of public attentiveness to these scandals. But there is no doubt that what Sam Ervin began with is still at risk. At what point does the government become so sort of unbelievable that the American people will no longer essentially support its existence?
Professor Lara Brown of Villanova University, Salena Zito of the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.